start shortly. I think our guest is with us, Dr. Tamara Gray. So, and it's 11 a.m. already. We are good to go. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidina wa Nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. So, good morning again, everyone. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land, which we are all joining from today, and pay my respect to the elders, past, present, and emerging. So I will ask Dr. Tamara if you can turn your camera on. If you're here, you can hear us. So just to make sure we are ready and good to go. And you're muted. Okay, can you?
I'm sorry, I actually got up to pray, so I was running back, so I actually missed. Because Maghrib just came in, so I wanted to make sure I prayed Maghrib before we started. I missed anything you just said, so I'm sorry.
No, that's great. No, it's all good. It's all good. I know it's 8 p.m. Up there. We are down at the bottom of the world. It is 11 a.m. in the morning. So I just acknowledge the country and welcome everybody to the program. So I would like to quickly introduce myself and our special guest, Dr. Tamara Gray, before we go and start to talk about the book, inshallah. My name is Suleyman Sertkaya. I'm one of the lecturers at Sturt University and ISRA Academy. I'm teaching primarily Sīra, philosophy of Sīra, and classical Islamic studies subjects like Hadith, advanced Hadith, and whatnot. And we have the honor of having Dr. Tamara Gray with us today. Tamara, let me introduce quickly Dr. Tamara Gray. Tamara Gray is the founder of Rabata, an organization dedicated to promoting positive cultural change through creative educational experiences. She holds a doctorate in leadership from the University of St. Thomas, a master's degree in curriculum theory and infrastructure from the Temple University, and spent 20 years studying traditional and classical Islamic sciences, Quran, Sīra, and Arabic in Damascus in Syria. Quite fascinating. Dr. Gray worked in the field of education for 25 years before moving into the non-profit world. She is now both the executive director of Rabata and its chief spirituality officer. Her work includes the daily nitty-gritty of project designs, as well as the support and mentorship of hundreds of women around the globe. She is an author, she is a translator, she is a public speaker, community leader, great mentor. So welcome, Dr. Tamara. It is great to have you with us today.
Thank you. I'm really happy to be here. I was telling everyone today, I'm going to Australia tonight.
Yeah, so. you are here, you are with us. Alhamdulillah, great to have you with us. So we will be quickly talking about this great book. So this is a multiple award-winning comprehensive compilation of the Sīra. So it has a recognition of international scholars, so many awards, and it is named as one of the most authoritative source in Sīra. And somebody working in the field of Sīra, at least for good 15 years, I'm happy to endorse this statement at the moment. And I thoroughly enjoyed reading this book, and I will definitely recommend everybody. So we will definitely come back to the book and talk about the book, its methodology, the importance of book, characteristics of the book in detail in a moment. But let's begin with the story of the book and story of the translation. I'm pretty sure it's an inspiring story, your story and the translation story. As far as I remember from the introduction, it took 7 years to bring this together and successfully publish it and make it available to the public. So my question is, how did how did the idea of translating this book came about, and why this book? Why not, let's say, Abu Shahbaz's Sīra? There are so many other books, I suppose, you could have translated from Arabic to English, and they would well deserve to be translated as well. But why this book, and how this idea and this translation came about?
Well, the why of this book, I think, is more personal, in that all of the translators were students of the author. And so when you're a student of someone who has written an incredible book, there is a real sense of the, I think urgency is a good word, the urgency for other people to share in the information, if you will, in that book. And for us, especially, I'm going to speak about myself. I'm a convert. So I became Muslim in 1985. I'm not Arab. I didn't grow up with the Arabic language. I grew up with English, and I had to learn Arabic later. Both of my translators had Arabic background. So they grew up, both of my co-translators, they grew up with the Arabic language. I didn't. And one of the points of pain for me was the inability to find material that was comprehensive and well-written and true to the source and beautifully published in English. And so as I grew in the Arabic language, and as I began to be able to be blessed with the ability to read things in Arabic, I knew that it was a unique blessing that I was experiencing. And I felt then, as I still feel, very much a sense of indebtedness to the blessings Allah has given me in that ability, and a sense that everybody else needed to read this book. And again, because I'm a convert, the struggle to get to know who is Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was a different struggle. And so for me personally, there were those very personal reasons about the why of translating this particular book. But I will say it wasn't our original idea. It was the idea of somebody else who had gotten together a very large committee of English teachers in Damascus who had done a good job getting the project started, but were really struggling. As you can imagine, translation really cannot be done except for if you are translating into your native language. Otherwise, it doesn't come out. It just doesn't. It's difficult to create a work that reads well. And so when we took over the project, we were invited to take over the project in order to bring it up to that standard. And it was really hoped, and the author was still alive at the time, so there was real hope that it would become a book that was at an academic standard, that would be of benefit to university students around the world.
That's great, quite inspiring. And some people are already posting, we are already inspired with the work. Excellent. I think there is always a need to read the life of the Prophet from a trusted, authentic sources. I think in one of the introductions, there was, Sirah really establishes relationship with the Prophet ﷺ. You establish relationship through learning his life in a complete, sound, and all-inclusive manner. But which book comes to the mind, that you can really trust? You don't really kind of get distracted with something else. And I think definitely this book is a good access to this authentic and very classical, Sīra in its pristine form. And it is excellently crafted into English. I'm not a native speaker, but I can already feel that as somebody whose English is second language, even fourth language, actually. So I think I make that connection quite easily, and I found that it's quite profound work. But let's talk about the author then. Who is Samira El Zaid, and we were discussing with some of the colleagues, and if she was to be a man, we would have hundreds of her talks and so many things available out there. But we were searching to learn about her. I did myself, even in Arabic. I only came across one YouTube talk, about 1 hour. I think that was after she passed away, rahimahullah, after 2019 or so. And there is not much really available about the author. So who is Samira El Zaid? What is her contribution to the Sīra? And like everybody praises her, she has done great job, 40 years of scholarship, at least in Sīra, and this, magnificent work that the contribution that she made. I don't think we can easily cite anybody else in Sīra as a woman, even a man. I'll come to that point. Sayyid Ramadan al-Bouti makes a great, I think, compliment about her scholarship, but even other disciplines as well. We are kind of grateful that at least we have somebody who has produced something in Sīra, and she is woman, and we are really pleased to see that. So please introduce us, who is Samira El Zaid. And I heard that she is your teacher as well, so I'm pretty sure
I was blessed to meet her many years ago. In fact, I was trying to think the other day, I think she might have been about my age now when I first met her. So of course I'm very young. Haha, just kidding. I am a grandmother already, but I was very young when I first met her, and she was a formidable person. Her presence in the room was both a real scholarship. Like, I don't know how to explain that. It was a woman with an incredible brain, just an all-encompassing brain, mashallah. And she spoke Fusha Arabic 100 miles a minute. And she also was a scholar of the Arabic language. So that certainly was a foundation of her scholarship as well. What her scholarship was this. So this collection of books that I have next to me is the original 6-volume set. So what she did, and it was a 20-year project. What she did is she went through all sources of every story, every incident is the better word, every incident in the Sīra. And she collected from Bukhari, from Ibn Hisham, from Ibn Ishaq, Ibn Hisham, Bukhari, Muslim, Hadith, all over, Hakim, all of the different places. And then in this book is just a collection of those various narrations. So you'll have one story with a number of narrations, including from the mawdu' narrations to the da'if, sahih, all of them, all together. It's an incredible resource for scholars and researchers because it's all together in one place. And then from there, she wrote what we translated here, this one. From there, she wrote the 2-volume work that is the mukhtasar. So it is the abridged version of this. And so here she chooses some of the strongest narrations that are here to put them together here. And then later after that, she wrote this, which is Durus min as-Sīra. And this is taking those same incidents and now adding her commentary. We translated the blue one. We translated this one. So this is a thorough, detailed account of the life of the Prophet ﷺ. But back to her, she herself as a scholar. So she spent 20 years in this work. During that time, she was teaching Sīra. That's how I met her. She was my Sīra teacher. And she was also teaching other subject areas, including Arabic. I also studied Arabic with her a couple of different times. And she was I think we might call it a public scholar now. I think that's the term we might use, in that she wasn't really in an ivory tower anywhere, but rather she was in with the people, teaching them, helping them. There was a person after she died who dreamt, right after she died, it was a man actually who didn't know her. he went to the funeral, and the next day he said, I saw her at her death being greeted by Khadija radiallahu anha, Maryam, Fatima, and I'm not sure who, Asiya maybe, there were four. And that's really, I feel like that really encompasses the kind of person she was. She was a very spiritual woman. Here's a little anecdote about her life. At one point, she was, as we all are, she was working on her inner self as well, not only her scholarly self. I mean, she was very much, I'm going to get to the anecdote in a minute, but I just want to say that she was very much both in love with the Prophet ﷺ, but very serious about being very careful about her study, her teaching, very specific, very careful. She wasn't a fluffy kind of, it's true that this other book is her commentary, but that commentary is serious commentary. It's not sort of your Sunday school commentary of, so be good or something like this. It's really serious commentary that uplifts and upbrings a generation of public scholars, I think, I would say. But so the anecdote is earlier on, two anecdotes I want to tell you. One is that when she was in her first year of university, I believe it was her first year, her mother died. And it was really hard for her, as you can imagine. And she made dua at that time, Ya Allah, replace her, you took her from me. I'm not saying the exact way she said it, of course, but you took her from me. So replace that with deen and iman. So give me, instead of that, faith and religion. And subhanAllah, like we really see that growing in her life. And so one time later on in her life, there are a couple of different anecdotes about her life. One is that she was at one point struggling. She was not complaining. She was, how do you say it? Telling one of her teachers, struggling. And her teacher said, maybe if you fast. And so she started fasting. And 7 years later, her teacher said, you're looking really tired. Are you okay? She said, and she discovered she'd been fasting for 7 years. Because of an effort to do things right, to grow spiritually, to grow. And certainly the intention of that study and all of that comes together within that. And there was another thing that she did in her lifetime. In Damascus, there was a hospital that was many, but there's the one I'm talking about, a maternity hospital run by a woman who was one of the first OBGYN doctors who had come with a degree from outside and come back and built a little hospital to serve women in Syria who wanted to have a baby, especially in an environment that was all women. But as you can imagine, and those of our listeners, our listeners who are listening and have any familiarity with the sort of history of the struggles of women, you can imagine that an all-woman hospital also had its struggles to get employees to pay the bills. So she used to go there after a full day of work, a full day of teaching. She used to go there around 9 o'clock at night. And this was previous to the days of, disposable sheets and disposable diapers, etc. And so she would go and scrub and wash out all of this najase stuff, and then wash it all, go home, go to sleep, and start her day the next day. So she wasn't all around. She was like the people we read about in books, this all around type of person who had incredible intelligence, incredible self-discipline, incredible service, incredible goodness to the people around her, and incredible help as well, like a recognition of the kind of help that her students needed and an ability to identify that and really tell her students, you need to work on this or you need to work on that kind of thing.
Amazing. I'm not really surprised that, she is kind of combining that scholarship with humility. And it is
so much.
Yeah, it is not surprising somebody who's studying the life of the Prophet in such a detail that she reflects that attributes in her day-to-day life. And I was really good that you touched upon that. I sensed her deep understanding of the Sīra in the introduction when she talks about why one should study Sīra. But when you read the book, you don't see her commenting on it and that sensitivity as well much. So that really gives us an understanding that she is careful to just combine what is the authentic Sīra based on reliable sources, because she is very careful to bring together these Sahih reports endorsed by somehow verses in the Quran, and she puts commentary on that respect only, whether it is a reliable chain or not. I think that's really important when somebody studies Sīra, because in Sīra sources you will find, like if you go and read a classical book, you will find a chain of transmission, so many narrations listed one after another. So like somebody who is not expert will be lost simply.
Yeah,
and
for sure.
This is a scholarship that she is really kind of aiding a lay person, as well as somebody who is going to start studying Sīra, there is a reliable accounts brought together and made available just in front of you. I'm talking about the abridged version, obviously. Yeah. So it's an amazing contribution. Just one more question about the author. Where do you locate her as a female scholar in Islamic studies in general, in Sīra studies in particular, and how you understand women's scholarship in general and her contribution and her place?
I think that in Sīra scholarship in general, you mentioned it earlier, and I think that she was the foremost Sīra scholar of our time. I think that not only her contribution, but her vast knowledge of the life of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was unsurpassed in her time. And I think she represents an important awareness in our community today, which is in a way a circling back to our origins, to our DNA, which is a recognition of the seriousness of women scholars and the important contributions of women scholars. So I really think that her work is critical, and I'm really happy that one of the books has been translated so far. I see a question in the chat box asking about the commentary. I understand that it is under the process of being translated. Alhamdulillah, I'm not a translator on that project, but I do hope that project does come to light. I'm imagining that I'll be an editor on it because it's a friend of mine who's working on it. But maybe I won't be. I mean, mashallah, there are plenty of other people out there who could do a great job, but my heart would want to be. But I really, she's a person who, in the world of scholarship, I think from the lay person to the scholar, we need to know her and know her work. She also has an aqidah book in Arabic that is a really great, simple, as far as aqidah can be simple, presentation of what aqidah is. And yeah, so right there, and where, I don't know, maybe I don't know how to answer the question as far as locating, but I just think that she's right in the place that is both as the foremost scholar, but also as a representative to everyone to remember our roots. The female scholarship is not just a woman standing up somewhere where we kind of say, oh yeah, look, we brought in a token woman, but serious scholarship and serious contributions to our growth, our spiritual growth and our intellectual growth and knowledge production.
Excellent. I think just to mention that I'm also looking forward to these lessons, because I always feel like what she thinks about these things. Yes, this is amazing. She brought them together quite masterfully. But what is her comment and understanding how she really kind of relates to these stories? So she sometimes quotes from Fiqh Sīra sources, sometimes quotes from Mubarak Furi's book, but she's really kind of abstaining to comment. So I really look forward to lessons, and I was thinking the same, because I already seen the Arabic books, Durus, fi Sīra. So and I immediately said probably she just making those contributions in that particular book. So I'm really excited to hear that that is coming up.
And what she does there is she has, here's the story, and then she has ta'liq. So her commentary is separate, so she's also very careful to not mix her commentary in between narrations to confuse the reader to think that her commentary is the narration. The narration is here, then there's a title that says commentary, and that's her commentary. And her commentary is very elevated. It's really, I think, for the, I don't know, maybe I shouldn't, it's really it's for anyone. It's for anyone, but it's certainly for the person who is struggling and striving in this world to imitate the Prophet and live in a way that would please him.
We will come back to the methodology of the book. I think we will talk about, how we can kind of locate the book in Sīra writings in general. So I will say a few words in that respect as well. But since we talked about the recognition of her scholarship, let me cite from Sayyid Ramadan al-Bhuti's, I really like what he said, and it is not easy to achieve somebody like Ramadan al-Bhuti's, approval and, compliment. So he says in the preface of the book, she is known for her service to Islam as a scholar, a teacher, a caller to Islam, and reviver of its principles. I congratulate the writer for her effort in bringing forth a book that puts into practice the objective method of serving Sīra, the Sunnah, fiqh, and Islamic culture in general. And this is really amazing, the last sentence. Truly, she has prevailed over the men of this age. So definitely he's saying that she is, above the men in this space with the scholarship and with the book that she authored. It's an amazing book. So by the way, if you have a question, you feel free to put in the chat box. So this is a conversation, question and answers format. So we don't really have presentation and then questions at the end. So feel free to post your questions while we go. So let's move on to the methodology of the book then, and the Sīra works in general. So there are many different ways, when we study Sīra, when we write about Sīra, we see clearly that one can approach and write about Sīra of the Prophet in many different ways. For instance, somebody can approach from the fiqh Sīra perspective, understanding the philosophy, how it, what we can learn from the Sīra, how we can interpret and implement. That is one perspective, right? And some can focus on the human side of the Prophet and just abstain anything about the miracles. So there are some books written in that sense. They don't really talk about, and say Quran is enough. We can criticize that, but I'm just talking about the general Sīra writings. One can dwell upon miracles as well. So this is another way of presenting the Sīra. One can write one aspect of the Sīra, so like Prophet's life as a family man, as an educator, or peace in the Prophet's life, wars in the Prophet, one specific angle of the Sīra. So many ways of interpreting and understanding the life of the Prophet is there, and I think heaps of books are really available in that respect. And because of this various understanding and various approaches, even there are books written to show these approaches, and the titles is like the lives of the Muhammad. So it is plural, not life of Muhammad, the lives of Muhammad, or the images of Muhammad, because you see different image in different book, or memories of the Prophet. So you can see, even about the type of the books written about Sīra, there are books written. So it is really quite rich literature is available there. So the question is, how we can classify this book in that respect, looking from the way and the approach, the angle the author is really taking?
Well, so she approached it first, and I'm going to answer also one of the questions in the chat here as well that relates to that, if that's okay. Because the question is, what has she done differently to classical Sīra texts like Ibn Hisham and others? And so what she did differently is that she began by collecting all of the classical Sīra texts. So Ibn Hisham is not it's one Sīra text. I studied it. And it has a lot in it, but we also find narrations elsewhere. And so what she did first is collect all of the narrations from all of the texts, whether they were sahih or hasan or da'if, or even mawdu', especially the mawdu' narrations that were popular in culture. So if even
so sorry to cut you off. Can you just put the translation? Mawdu is a fabrication. Sahih is the authentic report.
Yes,
so,
sorry. So even like the strongest of authenticated reports to less strong, to all the different levels, to the weakest, and then even what have been proven to be fabricated reports, but are still popular in amongst the people. So there are certain reports that are popular amongst the people to repeat, but they're fabricated. So she included those as well and labeled them as their fabrication. One of the things about scholarly books is that the labels often come in the sanad. So it's not always clear to the lay reader, just FYI for those of you, it's not like you're going to go through it and be like, oh, this one says mawdu' and this one says, but nonetheless, that's what she did. So she collected everything first. And from that, she built the 2-volume mukhtasar, the 2-volume abridged version, without any commentary except for in the introduction. And so there, what she's doing is she's bringing in a lot of detail. Now, because all of the narrations that we see still, because Sīra began with the maghazi, or the sort of war reports, there's still in the Medinan period, for example, long sections about Badr, about Uhud, about Al-Khandaq, for example, Fatah Makkah, all of these, and as because that's part of the reporting of Sīra, you know. But I, for one, for example, what I found really took my breath away, if you will, in my first reading of the book, were the details about the wufud, about the delegations. I had never seen them all together before. I'm just going to close this because I'm hearing my voice from somewhere else in the center here. But so the other details around, and even the details within the battle. As a translator, I remember talking to my co-translators about the details of even like how the fighting was happening and all of these sort of details that I wasn't used to seeing either. So I would say that this book and her methodology was to gather as much as is available today, with using as many modern methodologies as we can to bring them all together, put them together in one 6-volume book, and from there create or construct from these narrations and in actual narrated form, not just in narration form, this mukhtasar, and from there to take the main stories and clearly define her commentary, clearly list her commentary. So really it's a 3-step approach. And that is another thing that makes her really unique in the world of scholarship, because she really clearly delineates and designates sources and then puts them together for the rest of us to kind of understand and read it as a story. And from there also helps her reader or her students, anyone who reads her book, we could say is a student of her writing at least, follow her train of thought in where she was with the Prophet ﷺ.
Excellent. I think the title itself really kind of iron out this matter. So it is Al-Jami'. So Jami', you say Jami' for the mosque as well sometimes, because it is kind of bringing everything together. It is combining it's a collection of the sources. So it is in that sense, as you said, it is a very good collection that kind of encompasses pretty much more or less what has been written about the Sīra. Because when you think about Sīra sources, I'm not talking about the authenticity, I'll comment on that as well, but how Sīra is written, they generally talk about 14 different disciplines. To be able to write about Sīra, you need to know genealogy, you need to know general history, you need to know the history of the two cities or cities around Arabian Peninsula. You need to know Sīra books, you need to know Tabakat books about, authors, the transmitters of the Islamic sciences. You need to know many things. So this is one thing. That there are 14 different things that you can study to make Sīra available. That is one aspect of it. Bringing them together in 6 volumes is a quite great success. On the other hand, when you look at all these sources, these are Google. Everything is there. It is not really rectified. Somebody needs to sift through to make it available for the lay readers. Because when you search something on the Google, you can find anything and everything, true and false, and authentic and not really fabrication, everything. So you can somehow say that this is the case in sources as well, because they are historians. They combine everything. Taberi, in his introduction, he says that my job is to bring together. I don't sift through, I don't really evaluate. It is subsequent generations' work. So I think in that sense, really, this author is sifting through these narrations, because fabrication is there as well as the most authentic reports. So you see that she is mostly kind of, in a way, double check the report with the especially 6 authentic sources. Most of the time, brings something that is mentioned in the authentic sources, if not at least from Hakim's Mustadrak, which is kind of an addition to the most authentic sources. So it is, in a short, it is like Jami, like combination of the resources, but with a very delicate, understanding of what is authentic and what is not. She points out that, which is quite useful. So, and I think I should congratulate you that you make this available for the broader readers as well. Otherwise, it will be just up there, and people will still perplexing. What is the most authentic Sīra source? So, as you said, when it comes to understanding Sīra and applying Sīra, this is not the concern, right, for the author. So she's just trying to simplify and make it available to masses, what is there in our classical reliable sources. Whether you accept or not, whether it does make sense for you or not, she doesn't care.
That's right.
Her task is not that. Her task is make this Sīra based on and Bhuti quite successfully, he names this as an objective Sīra writing. And if you kind of try to write Sīra from what you feel that, this is more relevant and I can just disregard the rest of it. So this is subjective Sīra writing, he says. And this is really an objective way of presenting Sīra of the Prophet. One more question, Dr. Tamara, if you don't mind.
Can I just say one more thing about that, if I may? So, it's really true what you said, that the book was not about trying to explain to people why the Prophet ﷺ did this or did that. But in the classes, that's what she would do. So in the classes, when she would talk about the incidents, she would make them applicable to our lives. She would talk about how they are applicable, how we can understand them. She would iron out the knots, untie the knots and iron out the wrinkles of people's faith and connection to the Prophet ﷺ. And it was 20 years of those lessons and notes that have been taken that she put together to build the Durus min as-Sīra book, the other one, the lessons one. So you're really spot on there about recognizing that this book was about serious, objective scholarship. And I really recommend it. It's really nice for people, if they are going to read it with an instructor who will be walking them through the events and someone who knows what they're doing, who can really walk them through the Sīra.
That's a very important recommendation. I'll ask that question again towards the end. You know how to study Sīra. That's an important aspect of Sīra. But let's additional question about this methodology. Once again, you know, if I extend on the question, this is a biography, right? Biography of the Prophet ﷺ. Sīra is a biography, and it is important in a way that, you know, it doesn't require prerequisites to study Sīra, right? You don't need to know. I personally think there should be an usul anyway, like methodology, but there is no barrier. You know, you don't have certain rules and regulation. It is easy to connect to the Prophet ﷺ because of the nature of the thing. But when you talk about Sīra, ultimately we are talking about a biography as a genre. So, but biography can be written in many different purposes, like, and aims could differ from person to person. Sometimes you think, you know, there is an inspiring example, so you provide an inspiring example so people can imitate. Sometimes to celebrate a famous person, you know, or group, or show how particular life took a meaningful shape, why this man or woman is so important. So to present an image of a particular person. So what do you think? What is the purpose of this book? I think we kind of touched, and like just in few minutes or few sentences, what is the purpose of this book?
I think the purpose of this book is to reintroduce the Prophet ﷺ to modern Muslim society in a very serious way. I think that was her intention, and I think she did a great job of it.
Yeah, I think that's quite scholarly and great, you know, as you said, reintroducing the life of the Prophet based on this scholarship. As you said, it's a quite serious work as well. How about the audience? You know, like you felt the need of translating this into English. So what is the audience? What is, you know, when I ask this question, like the audience in my mind has two kind of type of audience. One is somebody who is Muslim, who is going to read the Sīra. You know, they can vary from somebody who doesn't know much about it, so they're going to learn, or somebody who knows the Sīra inside and out, and, you know, in kind of thing. You know, somebody is elementary level, somebody can be advanced level, you know, reader. So from that angle, or from Muslim or non-Muslim readers, you know, who do you think the audience for this book is?
For the translation in English?
Yep.
Well, when we were translating, we really wanted it to be accessible to anyone, whether it was a Muslim who was a beginner, or people of other faiths who are studying Islam for one reason or another, or people are more advanced in the study of Sīra. The language is reminiscent of the Arabic. It's not there is sort of it's intentional that it is reminiscent of the Arabic. It's an attempt the language itself is a higher level of language, but yet not so high that it's inaccessible. And really, I mean, we certainly hope that it is kind of the book that will be on everyone's shelf, you know, that everyone will have this as a reference book, as a book that they read, and that university classes that are teaching Sīra would use this book as a book, at least, if not to teach. I mean, it's authentic, it's clear, it's easy to read, and it's accessibility into his life. And one of the greatest tragedies of the modern era is that the Prophet ﷺ is misrepresented everywhere. And so anyone who really is curious and says, you know, I want to learn something about him, and they go to Google or something, they find so much that is just horrific, actually, that we're hoping to have something that's authentic, clear, that it's just straightforward academic stuff for those who are of a curious mind and a curious heart to have access to his life if they want to.
Excellent. We actually have a Sīra subject. This term, I'm teaching it as well. We just finished the Meccan period and have a term break. So we intentionally proposed this time. So most of our students are here, I suppose. And it is on our bibliography list as well. So it is on our subject outline, and definitely one of the great resource, really. It's a source, authentic classical source resource work for Sīra. Let's move on to the division of the book. So go a bit further into the book. So in terms of chronology, in terms of how author really presents the book, I really like the introductions, to be honest. There are 3 introductions to the book. It focuses on Sīra discipline, its significance, why Sīra should be studied, historical development of this discipline, Sīra discipline, early Sīra, early Sīra writers and their contribution. And obviously, she allocates a very significant amount of time explaining the context, pre-Islamic Arabia. This historical context is extremely important to understand anything about history, but obviously to understand the Sīra of the book of the Prophet ﷺ. So these sections are really just fantastic. And but one thing I note is, all Sīra works will start with that. It is not surprising, but it will be very short. They will generally say, okay, darkness were everywhere in India to here. Romans were having collapsing, and Persians were having conflicts and whatnot. There was a need for prophet. It is generally there. Some would have a bit further explanation, but this book really allocates a lot of time explaining this context to the discipline and context to the pre-Islamic Arabia, to the emergence of the prophet from that land. Then it becomes crystal clear to understand in a way why Prophet ﷺ emerged in that land. So it becomes quite important introduction. So what are your thoughts about this introduction first?
I think it's really critical. I remember when I first started studying Sīra, and there was such an emphasis from her about this age and this stage of the Meccan period, the Medinan period, and the whole Arabian Peninsula before Islam and before the Prophet ﷺ. She used to talk, for example, about how the Arabs were prepared. What were the qualities that the Arabs had to be able to become Muslim? And I remember being a young convert at the time. I was in my 20s still, and asking myself, did I have these qualities before I converted? So there are applications in a person's personal life, and then there are intellectual applications and understanding why here, why now, and also how to see the divine hand in all of this as well. How was the Arabian Peninsula prepared for Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam? And also, maybe this is as a convert, but to read so much about the predictions of the coming prophet was really a deepening of faith for me, as far as to just understand, read and study and know. One of the papers she had me do early on, because we were studying these early places, was a whole study of Paul. And it was so interesting because the study of Paul and the study of the early time of Jesus became also connected somehow to the Sīra. And those kinds of deep, wide historical connections are just, they're mind-blowing, really. And they grow a different type of scholarship, a different type of understanding of the reality of the messenger, Allahumma salli wa sallim alayhi, the reality of who he was and where he came and how it was prepared for him, how he himself genealogically was prepared for the message. I mean, I remember studying his line of the line of lineage and talking about the different relatives and imagining this and just thinking about DNA and the interesting parts of DNA that we don't know, but it seems that it was really important in the bringing forth of the Prophet ﷺ. So it really influenced my learning and my faith. And I think for people who are studying the Sīra, and I used to just sort of a Sunday school kind of stories about his life, this part is going to be really life-changing because it's stuff that they don't know, they're learning, they're understanding. Oh, okay, I get it. I get where he came to. I get the people. I understand what was going on.
Yeah, great. How about Meccan and Medinan period? I think everybody would appreciate when they read the importance of that era, understanding pre-Islamic culture and, Arabs' norms and whatnot. But when it comes to the Meccan and Medinan period, I realized that, the author classifies Meccan into 2 phases and Medinan period into 3 phases. So the division of the book is that. But in Meccan period, she follows those 2 phases. So secret call, the first 3 years of prophethood, and public call, the remaining 10 years in Mecca. And she sticks to that phases that she introduces at the beginning. But when it comes to Medinan period, she introduced 3 phases. So one is just the trials and instability in Medina up until that, those battles, up until the truce, up until the Treaty of Hudaybiyah in the 6th year, and then negotiations and opening up to the rest of the world up until the Fath of Mecca. And then from there on, widening the span of Islam to the rest of the delegations comes and whatnot. So these are 3 phases. But when it comes to actual chapters, she proposes these 3 phases, but she actually does not really stick to this, and she kind of follows a different methodology, different way, and she focuses on Medina on a yearly basis. So talks about the first year of Hijrah and what happened in the first, and then second up until the 10th year of Hijrah. So question is, why she kind of proposes these phases, but not really stick to that in the Medinan period. Don't you think these phases will lose their importance, or readers will get lost? Why she proposed this and she's not really talking about it again?
Yeah, so I actually grabbed the Arabic because if I'm not mistaken, that was a translator's decision. We have Sana Raba'a Hijri, no, okay, Sana Khamsa, no. Okay, so in the Arabic, she does also do what we did, which is separate by the years. I just was double checking because all of a sudden I had a memory of that discussion, of having this discussion together around the years and the subject matter. But the Muslim mind understands Sīra based on Hijri years. And so if you take away those Hijri years, there can be a loss of placement historically. And so I think, but the Hijri years don't start until Medina. And so if we talk Hijri, or if we talk Revelation years, as there is a book that talks Revelation years in the pre-Medinan era, that also we're going to be lost there and not really understanding how things are happening. And so I think that the reason she did that is to help the reader follow what they know. So in education, you want your students to bring what they know and then increase that. So it helps to anchor what they know in that year while then laying on top of that all the details that they don't know.
Yeah, that's great. I think there are some scholars, when they talk about Sīra and how to understand Sīra, they say pre-prophetic time, like 40 years of the prophet from birth. Yeah. So you kind of know milestones there, like, not every single detail in his life, very critical incidents, milestones like Halful Fudul, his alliances, his role in, rebuilding the Kaaba, his marriages, his travels and whatnot. Yeah. These are really important milestones in his life. When it comes to Mecca, they say, to the point that almost year by year, the major things in that year. When it comes to Medina, to the point of months, and towards the end, to the point of days, you would know the Sīra if you study. I think this really kind of projects that a bit, but doesn't really practice that. So that is great. But another question, I think everybody will be curious to hear about this. Meccan period is more or less, discussed in the same pattern, same manner. It is secret call and persecutions, harassments, tortures, and we know this story. But when it comes to Medinan period of the life of the Prophet ﷺ, the book, it's like we said, it really kind of reflects the classical sources quite well. But there is always this criticism. I always make this criticism when I teach Sīra to our classical sources. Unfortunately, there are legitimate reasons for this, but unfortunately, when it comes to Medina and period of the Prophet's life, much of the books are allocated to Medina, and it is discussed in the context of ghazwas, right. Expeditions, battles, one after another. So I kind of name this as a battle-centric approach towards the life of the Prophet. Early Sīra books, most of them were titled Maghazi anyway. So they were not really titled as Sīra up until the 2nd or 3rd year of Hijrah. Right. Second century of Hijrah. Right. So it is quite a dominant approach. It is an overarching theme when we read the life of the Prophet in Medina. But when you kind of carefully study Sīra, the time spent for battles, there are statistics. We clearly know everything. As I said, when it comes to Medina, we know a lot of things. So when you study carefully, you see that a very little amount of time spent in battlefield, like actual fighting. Some scholars will say this is just 3 days. Doesn't really extend to the day of Badr, day of Uhud, day of Hunain. Really, these are the battles in his life, the actual two armies fighting one another. So if you include all these 75, expeditions, Sariyas, Ghazawat, and whatnot, the time spent for this is 144 days, really, to be precise. And if you include anything that happened, that Prophet was not there, it is not more than a year. So this is the statistics we have. So when we think about the life of the Prophet ﷺ, as a prophet, it is 23 years. His Medinan life, it is 10 years. So don't you think, this theme that, like, when somebody reads the life of the Prophet, they would like leave the book. You grab the book about the Prophet ﷺ, you read his life, you read Meccan difficulties and Medinan battle after another, one after another. So you leave the book as if Prophet ﷺ just spent his life in battlefield and he didn't do anything other than that. It is quite sad, really, in that respect. But I noticed also, I have to acknowledge that you kind of, because of these concerns, because of these overarching themes that are revolved around the battles, you added a translator's introduction to Medina. That was something I don't think it exists in the thing, in the original copy. So why did you feel the need to add this introduction, and what message you are really sending to the readers by doing this? Or did you have a conversation about the author, why everybody is presenting his life just through battles and expeditions and whatnot in Medinan period?
Yeah, so first of all, as you so well said earlier, that Maghazi is how the Sīra began, right? So the study of the battles is kind of how it began as a field. And across global borders, how did people write history? They wrote battles and leaders, battles and leaders. So it's a historical reality that we have to deal with, that history is often written about these big, people don't write about, then we went to the market and we found this one outfit that had special stitching and we thought, oh, we like the zigzag stitching, so we got that one. And these are things that are forgotten to time, except for sometimes in literature. So I think the first thing is, whenever we're going back to read about the Prophet, I said him to remember that it is a historical book, as you said. It's a biography. It is a historical book that documents his life, which, like anything else across borders, it's going to document and emphasize what peoples had a tendency to emphasize, in this case, battles and power, like who was the leader, who wasn't, and all this kind of stuff. It was very important to us, and that we that we talk about. So she presented as classical objective study, as you said earlier. Like she was like, this is what it says, right? But I still think that this book, unlike others, has more details around the battles that do help to thicken that, to remind us that the battles were important. We learn a lot from them, but it wasn't everything about the life of the Prophet. There were more things happening. There were other things going on. And with a good instructor teaching that, the instructor herself or himself can pull and stretch those a little bit and emphasize them. Talk about some things you just talked about, like how many days, like we don't, how many days did we spend talking about, for example, how many days did he spend in Abu Ayyub's home? And what did that look like and feel like? And sort of pause on that for a moment and think about that as that interaction, as opposed to also continuing because I agree with you that a problem of the modern age is that we look at the Prophet ﷺ and we think that his life was full of battles, and it's not the case. His was a life full of many other things, including relationships, including interactions, including difficulties that included the kinds of difficulties we face today. So our introduction here is to really explain much of that. Like if you look at it, we talk this little tiny translator's introduction, talking about of the 28 ghazwas of the Prophet, only 7 are considered battles, for example. And just as you mentioned, all told, these military expeditions did not take more than a few months of the entire 10-year span of the Prophet's life. So yes, we did attempt to point this out in the introduction in an attempt to sort of help the reader understand that what they're reading is typical of historical texts, but nonetheless, their job as a reader is to understand that this battle happened and a lot of life happened that wasn't necessarily recorded.
I think that's an important introduction, really. I really like that you kind of, it's a wise decision, really.
Thank you.
To put that at the beginning so people, they understand the context and don't really assume that these battles are just battles. Because most of the things, they are just patrolling units. We do have, cops going around. It doesn't mean we are in the fight, right? We are in the battle. It's the safety and security, nothing else. And making sure that safety is established. And in that era, which safety and security was almost at risk most of the time, especially when you travel. So it is such an important thing to establish stability, and you will understand if there is a chaos like today. We read the news every single day. It is horrifying to see different parts of the world, going to. So that is, the function of those units, if you like, or patrolling units is critical to establish peace. And that is the inherent nature of this cause and the message that Prophet is introducing to people. I think we kind of had a bit heavy discussion, so let's a bit lighten this. So there are a few questions about the journey. So how long did it take to team, 3 of you translators, to conceptualize conception of the completion? Were you all working full time? I think it's a very, very long journey. It took a lot of time. So somebody is asking that.
We were 3 women who were, all 3 of us had full-time jobs. And in the middle, so we had our full-time jobs as well as family obligations, as well as other volunteer work that we did. And this was our additional project that we took on with an intention to do it as quickly as we could. We would get together and spend sometimes hours on one word, just discussing what is the right word here in English. How do we do this? How do we express this so as to represent the intention of the text with a word that is appropriate for it? And there were times when we would collect questions, and we were very blessed because the author was still living at the time. So we could go to her and say, here's some questions of things we don't understand. And she would explain, and that would help us create a translation that was more understandable to the English reader rather than a direct literal translation. During the middle of our project, the Syrian Hadas, we call them, I can't think of the Syrian trouble started.
Arab Spring, they say.
The Arab Spring, yeah. And I ended up leaving. All three of us actually ended up leaving. And for a while, one of us was still in Damascus with very, very, very poor internet. So that was, difficult. Another was in another country with also not great internet. And I was in the United States, and it was really difficult. But, we, alhamdulillah, that we didn't give up and kept on going and kept on trying at it. After we finished the first translation, it went through 3, I think, editing periods of really careful editing, where literally reading the text to the rest and looking for, sometimes putting the Arabic and the English together, and then at the end, just the English to check for even commas and things like this. I told one of our editors about your comments you had made to me about how even the tashkil, and the quotes and the comments. Yeah, she was really, it really made her day, actually, when I told her that, because sometimes people don't notice those kinds of details. But it is a book about the Prophet ﷺ and for him. So it was really important to do the best that we could in it. But it was a long process, and no, we weren't full time, and no, we weren't, we had a lot of other stuff in our lives at the time. But alhamdulillah.
Yeah, I should kind of commend again that, it's really quite meticulous in that sense. Transliterations are, you see that woman's hand is touched to this work, and it is very almost there's no mistake, no error in terms of transliteration. We read a lot of things, translated from one language to another. Lots of mistakes happens, somebody forget to put these vowels and whatnot, but it is quite good. I think I can see that the editing process, well done, is quite a great in that sense. It doesn't really disturb you when you read the book. These things really distract you quite easily, so you don't see that much. And the copy is also quite good, quite nice copy. Somebody is asking about the Arabic words, the tough Arabic words to translate, to find, to most accurate translation. How did you overcome this barrier, or what are other challenges perhaps? I should say, you sometimes don't really translate words as well intentionally. That is also good. Like when it comes to maghazi or fath, you put some additional notes there to explain and why fath cannot be translated as a conquer or conquest. These things are fascinating. So what do you think about that?
Well, like I said, every word, we literally, whenever there were difficult words, we would spend hours together discussing and talking. And then if we were really stuck, we would go and talk with the author about what is the right representation of that word. One of the things about the Arabic language, which maybe the audience isn't 100% aware of, is that, and I remember, in fact, I'll tell you a story. One time, Samira herself was talking to me early on, and she was telling me about how great the Arabic language was, and I was still struggling to learn it. So I wasn't necessarily convinced at how great the Arabic language was. And she said, oh, it's so great because in one word, we have so much meaning. And I remember thinking, well, wait a minute. I want different words. I don't know what I was not impressed. Astaghfirullah. But when we came to translate, the richness of the Arabic language was overwhelming to me. In that one word, so many words could be for that word. And so really it's, it is, I don't know what to say, like the struggle that made it more of a struggle, because we understood that there was a measure of subjectivity that a translator can bring and that we didn't want to bring. We wanted to respect the objectivity that she had come to the Sīra with. We wanted to have the same thing in translation. And so there was a lot of work that had to happen to really look for the intentional Arabic word, English word that we wanted to use here. So yeah, I mean, for the tough Arabic words, we spend a lot of time. I'm not a native Arabic speaker, but both of my colleagues are native Arabic speakers and native English speakers. So they had both languages, and so their contributions were invaluable. And I mean, much more than mine, I can say, especially from this side of Arabic. Though I must say, it was an incredible learning experience for me. The act of translating grew my Arabic to incredible. It was way light years better than it had been. When I started, it would take me sometimes 3 hours a paragraph to do translation. And by the end, it was, I don't know about timing, but it was a much different experience. So even more than 3 hours in the beginning, probably. Yeah.
Great teamwork. You see the barakah of thing, consultation. Is the Sīra there to make a decision? You definitely see, the blessing of that process. So it looks like a great team working on this project, and product is a testament to that, I think. So another personal question, I really want to hear what part or parts of the book fascinated you the most. If you are caught to one example or two examples, what really stood out for you from the book?
Well, so one of the parts of the book that has always stood out to me is the part that is about the wufud, or the delegations. And one of the reasons for that is because as a convert, I converted in the 80s. And in the 80s, it was an interesting time. And there was a lot of, and still around the world, this happens to converts, which is that there's this pressure to sort of leave yourself behind and come to Islam and take on the culture of the Arabs, or the culture of the Desis, or whoever happens to be the culture of the people that you mix with when you first become Muslim. And it becomes something really difficult for converts, and something that can be a real hardship, and the losing of the self almost. And that type of losing of the self isn't healthy, because later it can be a real struggle, and etc. Anyway, so in the wufud, me watching the Prophet ﷺ, I felt like I was watching him, talking to converts, talking to new Muslims, and really embracing their whole selves. Bani Azad is an example where this tribe comes to Prophet, they're already Muslim. And he in talking with them, they bring forth the qualities they had before Islam that were good, that they brought to Islam. This was mind-blowing for me. Maybe for non-verts or non-converts, it's like, yeah, of course, but for someone who had spent a lot of time sort of being told that, I don't know, there's a lot of baggage there that converts come with. This was so beautiful because it was proof positive of what I intuitively knew, which is that, of course, the good qualities you bring to Islam are a beautiful thing. But here was the Prophet ﷺ embracing these qualities and then challenging them for even better ones, which was that's one story, but all of the wufud I really enjoy. It's really, for me, it's a moving part of the Sīra to watch the Prophet ﷺ interact with new people constantly, and how he was able to adjust how he interacted with them so that they benefited. He was always able to in full truth and full authenticity, but be fully flexible to what the people needed. And along with that, my other favorite part of Sīra is, even though I'm a big picture person in general, but I like to look down into the narrations before the hadith, like if you're looking for what the Prophet is about to say, there's a space in between قال Abu Huraira or something, عن Abu Huraira radiallahu anhu or whomever, but there's a space that sometimes shows a conversation between the Prophet and a companion. I love that part. I love to see that interaction between them and imagine that context and that experience of going to the Prophet with a question, with a worry, with a concern, and having that answered, and to see sometimes similar worries and concerns answered in different ways, also demonstrating the flexibility of Rasulullah, not just flexibility, but the awareness of Rasulullah of people's needs and different needs at different times and how his responses to that. And I think it's something that we really need to learn in our community, learn how to emulate that and embrace that and hold on to that.
That's great. I think everybody really relates in different ways with the Sīra. You can see the richness of the Sīra and the relevance to every kind of scenario, every kind of problem, and how you find the solutions in the Sīra. But one thing I really fascinated was with the book is, how these things are named, explanation of the things that are like, you hear it, somebody's name, grandfather of the Prophet, he was named because of this, he was reconciling between the people, so he was named as such. Like those details, a lot of details are there in the book, which is fascinating. Just one interesting thing I just wanted to mention. So people are interested in the best Sīra book, Dr. Tamara. People, as I said, I think sometimes reading Sīra is important. You relate to the life of the Prophet ﷺ, but picking the right book and and the most authentic as well as the most relevant, like right choice is extremely critical. So we have a lot of books available in English. So some people are posting and asking, what do you think? When we kind of compare some of the books in English in Sīra, how would you comment on that, and which one would be the best read or recommendation from your person? Obviously, we shouldn't really.
Yeah, I was gonna say, you mean other than this one, because definitely this one is my recommendation. I have to think about it. I don't know. I have a collection of Sīra books at home. And it's sort of an unofficial collection. I don't think I'm an actual collector, but whenever I see Sīra books, whether I know it or not, I tend to grab it or buy it. And one of the things that we do at Rabata is we have a bookstore for our, this would be sort of a place for people to find good books about Islam. And so I definitely look for Sīra books to try to bring here. And I seem, I don't know, I mean to be really gentle about this, but I often find as a woman, I often find language that I struggle with in books written in English. And I can get over it because it's okay, like I'm moving, I'm reading for the rest of the book. But yeah, so I don't know. I think I don't know which one I would recommend. It really depends. I often say that Sīra needs to be studied with someone because of potential language confusion, because of potential confusion of the way we live compared to the way the Prophet ﷺ lived, for example, and understanding, what that looked like and how, just not to project necessarily the way we view things onto the Prophet ﷺ's life. So yeah, but that being said, I really like the language of Martin Ling's book. I like that old language very much. And that was one of the first Sīra books I ever read. So I have sort of a heartfelt connection to it. although there is a piece in there that I would disagree with how he presented a part of it. I also like the In the Footsteps of the Messenger, which is also a good book. But again, I also disagree with a few parts of the book as well. So yeah, I mean, Revelation was a book that was very popular here in the United States for a while. It has great charts, and it's a fun new way to look at the life of the Prophet. But again, I would take issue with a few things there as well. So I'm a little bit difficult, and I'm sort of sometimes say about myself, I'm a coffee snob. I guess I'm a Sīra snob too. I'm sort of like very particular, but I'm like that with a lot of books. So
no, yeah, I think that's great. I would kind of approach it in a similar way. It really depends on what you want to know. Like to know Sirah in its pristine form, without additions, comments, just what happened. Here is the book. Read this one. If you want to know the fiqh of Sirah, you know how you can deduce some sort of lessons, how it becomes relevant to you, and modern period, you can read fiqh Sirah books like Muhammad Ghazali, Sayyid Ramadan al-Buti's. Some other books are in the similar fashion. If you want to read like of an emotional connection to the Prophet, there are some books written in that way as well. If you read another impartial Sirah book, but dealing with different aspects, not only chronology of the Prophet, Muhammad Hamidullah's work is excellent. So it really depends on what you want to learn and what you want to gain from the Sirah. So I think we can have another session about the recommended books and pros and cons of each Sirah book in a way. So it will be hard, but I think definitely one of the best recommended books is in our hands. Alhamdulillah, that's a great success. So we only have I think 7-8 minutes left. Two more questions I have. One is just to summarize what we have so far discussed, but another personal question. Since you have so much interaction with the author, what do you think the author, who is the scholars that author would be influenced the most or recommend to you to read while you study Sirah with her?
Nedwi, I can say that with confidence. That she really spoke very highly of Sheikh Nedwi, and so yeah, that's why I would say it would be her in person. Yeah.
Well, I'm not surprised. Nedwi and his teacher, Maulana Shibli,
yes.
To be honest, if they are not that accessible in English, there are books, but it's not on the publications are not there. I think it's not being published. But his teacher, Maulana Shibli, excellent Sirah, really similar to the way she is following in this book. Maybe she is influenced by Shibli as well, because they had a great project in subcontinent to just reconcile between Sirah and Hadith narrations and present the life of the Prophet from that angle. So I already noted the Nedwi. I'm not surprised that you're saying Nedwi, because you can feel that she's quoting quite frequently, especially in critical matters. She immediately brings his views, or at least sides from that work. Let's have a final question. I think we will just finish off with this one. It's quite late there. I think we have given you a lot of trouble already. So just to wrap up, I think we somehow discussed this anyway, but coming back to the question, to summarize whatsoever we discussed so far. So, what readers are going to gain really in this book, few things that you would say, because of this and this book, this translation must be read, and it will play a significant role. Just to summarize what we have so far discussed today.
I think because of the unfortunate modern way of talking about the Prophet ﷺ through both Orientalism and Islamophobia and sort of the widespread Google mess about him, it's really critical for our young people and our older people and all of our people to read a book like this. And I think it's also necessary that it's available for all seekers of truth in the world that want to know, even if they're not interested in faith, but they just want to know, who was this man actually, not who was he as he's being presented in so many horrific ways online. And I also think that in this, in our aqidah, La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah, that worldwide, the idea of believing in God is something that is still alive. And we may come upon times, or we will, I'm sure, come upon times in the future where it isn't. But right now, especially in America, there's a lot of people who still believe in God. I don't know what it's like in Australia. But the understanding of who is Muhammad, Allahumma salli wa barik alayhi, is really not there. And so, and I would say that even amongst Muslims, we are distant from him. We have almost, the metaphor I usually give is, if you touch a cactus or cactus fruit without gloves to peel it, what happens? You get all these little stickies in your hands that are really difficult. It's hard to get rid of them, but you also can't see them. They're painful, but you can't see them. And our hearts are filled with all these little cactus pricks because of Google, because of textbooks that, if we're learning in public schools across the world, textbook representations of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, movie representations, Google represents all these different places that we don't even know we're being infiltrated by cactus pricks of lack of connection and belief to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So I think really for the health of our very faith, it's important to read this book, or a book very close to this, to help us clear the cobwebs, clear the cactus pricks. And even better if it's read with a teacher who can answer questions, who can help to enrich practices of faith along with it. We teach this book in our institution, Rabat, Rabat.org, if anyone's interested. It's a women's organization, but we do teach it at level 3. And so it's been very helpful for those who are studying it.
Do you have a particular way of teaching this book? I said this is last.
Our teacher right now is one of the translators, Ansaranda Mardini, and she was also a very close student of Samira, and she teaches it both very directly, but also encouraging students to really think creatively around how can we represent Sīra in our lives. And so there's both the serious, straightforward learning it, as well as the higher level of understanding it and then applying it.
Just Zuhr time is here. I didn't notice.
MashaAllah. MashaAllah. Yes, Rabat.org. Thank you, Leila. Thank you.
I am extremely sorry. I took all the measures. I forgot the time. So it's
no worries at all. I actually didn't hear it. It's all good.
Yeah, okay. So that brings us to the end, and I think that was a fantastic discussion. We just kind of wanted to give an insight into this book and introduce this to the Australian wider audience. So I think I'm very pleased to hear your thoughts and your story. It was excellent. It was really inspiring, and I'm pretty sure people read a lot of comments in the chat box interested in the book already. Alhamdulillah, that's a great success. Before we go, I would just quickly, this is a kind of a commercial thing, but something about Sīra I wanted to share that is coming up. So we have a Sīra reading competition every year. So this year, we are having a competition over the book of Shifa, Qadi Iyas Shifa. So the book will be read, and there is a reading competition, and obviously there are some awards. So if you go up to the upcoming events, just write At the bottom, everyone's reading about him. So it's a reading competition. There are great prizes and whatnot. Excellent book. Qadi Iyas Shifa is one of the most important, I suppose, classical Sīra books as well, introducing the Prophet ﷺ, and I'm pretty sure it will kind of implant a love towards the Prophet ﷺ when this is read. So I encourage everybody to look up to these upcoming events, and take part in this great competition. Nobody loses in this competition. Everybody gains and learns.
Yeah, mashallah, what a cool competition. I love it.
Thank you so much, Dr. Tamara, once again for your time, for being us today. And thank you for everyone for your comments, for being here and attentively listening and engaging with the presenters. And take care, keep safe, all the best. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Alaikum salam.